scientists and policymakers, engineers who are together with us this morning. We are very grateful to you for having accepted our invitation. This workshop is on a very important subject, important for India, addressing earthquake risk in India. And perhaps this is one of the, I would say, one of the most underrated risks in this country. Not that we don't have today perhaps much better institutional as well as scientific capabilities to assess earthquake risk, to understand what are some of the sensitive, seismically sensitive regions in this country, but also very efficient response mechanisms. So when something like an earthquake, like other disasters happen, today it would be fair to say that India has the capability of responding very quickly and very efficiently to these kind of events. These have now reached a point where we are also able to assist other countries when they are struck by these kind of disasters. And we've seen that India was one of the first respondents when the recent earthquake in Turkey occurred. We were able to send relief teams, we were able to send equipment, which was recognized by the Turkish government as being a very important contribution to dealing with the effects of a very, very severe earthquake. It is, of course, well known. I'm not a scientist, but I can certainly testify to the fact that, geological history is that the Indian plate has been pushing against the Eurasian plate, and that is the reason why we have the wonderful formidable range of the Himalayan mountains. Not many people know perhaps that this shift is still taking place. There is still an Indian plate which is pushing against the Eurasian plate. And the Himalayan mountains, it is said, are also still rising by maybe a small fraction every year. So that itself is a very sensitive seismic zone. I happen to have a home in Dehradun, and that, as you know, the Sivaliks and the foothills of the Himalayas, that is where we are. And that is perhaps one of the seismically most sensitive zones in the country. But I sometimes feel very perhaps despairing that a lot of the construction which is taking place around me in Dehradun, that is not an area where you should be having multi-storied buildings. But if you do have multi-storied buildings, then you need to make sure that there is earthquake proofing. I hate to say that a large number of the buildings in Dehradun are not geared to being able to withstand a very major earthquake. And I suspect that that is the case despite all our capabilities, despite the fact that we have perhaps a much higher level of knowledge today than we have ever had before. This is not translating into really practical action. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, for example, are the urban bylaws, which we have, as perhaps the first line of defense in a sense. That most of our urban areas, perhaps in the bylaws, the kind of adequate earthquake proofing technologies and techniques which should be utilized are perhaps not being utilized. We always wait for a disaster to happen before we try to learn from them. Why should that be the case? Especially in a country which has such a formidable range of scientific and technological capabilities. Let me give you a sense of why we decided to have this workshop. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Shailesh Nayak, a very eminent scientist, but a former secretary of the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and I'm privileged to have been associated with him for a number of years, especially when I was Prime Minister's Special Envoy on climate change. Perhaps not many people realize that there is also a very strong link between climate change and the subject that we are talking about today. And so it was a great privilege for me to be associated with him, to learn from him, and to seek his guidance and support in a lot of the work that we were trying to do with respect to meeting the challenge of climate change. When the recent incidents took place in Joshimath, where there was a subsidence, very major subsidence, leading to a lot of the houses there and buildings there being affected. This is again a story which has been long in the making, because these are areas which are, as I mentioned to you, if there is a terrain which is still shifting, if it is a terrain which is very, very fragile, very young, in fact, we should be extra careful in terms of the construction that we do over these areas and the kind of load, population load which we put on these areas. So I was not surprised at what was happening in Joshimath, because I have been trekking in the Himalayas for last 40 years, and I have seen over the period of time how kind of ecological degradation has been taking place for some of the most fragile ecologies anywhere in the world. And we need to really look at this very seriously. So although we are talking about addressing earthquake risk in India, I would hope that we would also address specifically something related to the Himalayas as well, because that's perhaps one of the most fragile zones, as I mentioned. We have really a most impressive list of participants in this workshop, some of the most distinguished scientists and representing some of the most, I would say, institutions of excellence in this country. And therefore, I think the discussion that we will have here today will be of great importance in terms of, coming up with some recommendations, some insights, which we would hope then can be followed up by other institutions. We are particularly grateful to Dr. Ramchandran, Secretary of the Ministry of Earth Sciences, who has very kindly also agreed to be with us today. His ministry, of course, plays a critical role in terms of the subject that we are talking about. So we have both a former Secretary of the Earth Sciences Ministry as well as the present Secretary. So I think whatever we discuss here, I'm sure will have great resonance and will feed into policy making in this country. Very also grateful to Director N Shrivastava, who's here with us this morning. In putting this workshop together, of course, the Director and all my colleagues in the India International Center have played a very important role, and I would like to thank them for their contribution. So with these inaugural remarks, may I request first of all Dr. Ramchandran, perhaps if you could just say a few words before I will turn to Dr. Shailesh Nayak to give us a sense of what this workshop is all about and what we seek to achieve from its celebration. Dr. Ramchandran, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. First of all, I thank the organizers, IIC, as well as all participants for coming together to discuss about this particular subject. Of course, it is a very important subject. As you all know that 1/3 of the casualties is due to this particular risk. But we are not cope up with that. What are the risks embedded in this, and what are the things to be done, need to be done in all sectors, either it is science or policy or strategy or whatever the things. When we talk about science, of course, we have first and foremost is a monitoring mechanism. When you talk about monitoring mechanism, we have sufficient monitoring mechanism for the earthquake, where it is going to occur, what is the, when we will be able to inform the information and other things. But what we need to do beyond, of course, we have to go of course, the early, even few seconds before, if you are able to predict, and it is a huge impact the casualties to save or whatever the things happen. So in terms of science, basically what I address is, I am looking forward is basically what we need to know more. What we know presently, of course we know presently some of the things, and maybe some of the signals, whether we can only from the earth we can get from Mother Earth, or maybe we can go for even ionospheric level, we can have some disturbance from the ionosphere, whether we are able to get from early these things, or any other tools, or any other monitoring mechanism we have to enhance for monitoring signal just before the earthquake occurs, whether we will be able to do that is number one, monitoring. And second thing is, we have already so many observations are available from the time series observation. From that observation, whether we can use various tools or modeling, you start from statistical or numerical or maybe the new tools about the AIML, something deep tech or anything, whether you can use it and see is there any precursor available or not. That is another thing which we need to look at. And the third one is any other latest technologies are available, or maybe monitoring and other things, whether we can incorporate a particular technique or anything for understanding. So anything is understanding is the first one is. So now understanding thing, and second thing is whatever we understood, whether we can provide some products and services. In terms of services, yes, we will not be able to give 100% forecast, but there is a small distinction whether we can predict. There is a difference between, subtle difference between predictability or prediction and forecast. Of course, forecast we have to see the past rhythm and present rhythm and try to go for quantitative where and when and what. That is very difficult at the term of science for the earthquake. But whereas predictability, potential predictability, okay, these are the regions, suppose Himalayan region, these are the things we are building up. So there is a possibility of this, whether that is also very important things which we can think about. So that type of services we can provide. And the third thing is in terms of service, the existing building or the new building, micro-donation and other things, whether what we have to provide the policy guidelines to the government. So what are the maybe the city level or some of the, especially the earthquake zone 4 and 5 region, what are the things to do, what we should not do, and also what has been made, how to protect it. So that information, I think, from the seismological only can provide. So that information also is very important. And I personally feel that we have to give some policy advice, because it is, I always tell that atmosphere is more and more observation, more people are working, so it has gone to forecast mode. And ocean also, it is secondary next to atmosphere density. As density goes on, our predictability becomes harder. And the ocean, we are able to predict now, forecast now. Seasonal time forecast is mainly from the ocean. Now I am sure that definitely the solid depth fluid also we will be able to forecast, but when and other things are questioned, but we all put consolidated effort. I think I am sure we will get a clue from the Mother Earth when it will happen, what it will happen. I think we can discuss about various aspects, and I once again thank the organizer for really bringing out this important workshop here. I salute to all of you, who those who what is called embedded in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramchandran, for your remarks. And as you mentioned, that there is still considerable amount of work to be done, and we look forward to your leadership and the leadership of your ministry to guide us onto the right path. I will now return to Dr. Shailesh Nayak, who is really the person who has conceived of this workshop and structured it in the manner that you see in the program. There is also a concept note which gives you an idea of what we are trying to achieve through this workshop. But I think Dr. Shailesh Nayak will be able to explain this in his own words much better. So, Dr. Nayak, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. And first of all, I must thank Shyam Saran ji, President, when this idea came from Sri Gopal Krishna Gandhi to hold such workshop. He immediately accepted, not only accepted, he personally got involved and saw this, that what we should, the structure of this earthquake. And Mr. Shrivastava was very ably, along with his team, able to put this together. And I must also thank Vinit for initial discussion on this which we had. So I think it is all collective information which we had been trying to gather together. As already been mentioned, that it is one of the hazard where we do not have yet full understanding of either prediction or forecast. And unlike the other hazards, the floods or a tsunami or many others, we have been able to do that. So basically it means that our existing knowledge about the earthquake is not sufficient, which allows us to make any reasonable prediction. So in that scenario, we need to assess that what is our vulnerability to the earthquake and how well we are prepared to face such an event, and whether we can develop some resilience in the community to address this issue. In other words, there are three aspects. One is the knowledge about the earth system, how the earthquake generates, what is its hazard potential. The second is whatever knowledge we have till now about the earthquake, how well we can respond, what is the government mechanism at the local, state and the central level to respond to such an event, how best we can use the existing knowledge to make this, what is the infrastructure required to respond to such an event. And the third is, which is also very critical, is the what are human consciousness or the awareness about this hazard, especially in the children. If you see this in the global scenario, where all the three aspects, the knowledge, with respect to knowledge, the response and the awareness, all the three together, let's say in Japan, the casualty is less. With the same knowledge, in Turkey we have seen the response mechanism was not adequate. It was there but not adequate, and we had a large casualties. So not only the knowledge, but all the three aspects has to be integrated to make a system. And this is what we are trying to address to this. Now, what we can do to increase our knowledge? Dr. Ravi mentioned that we have the monitoring mechanism. We have, like ocean and atmosphere, he gave an example that the observing systems are there, which used in different models, numerical or statistical or whatever models, and you come with certain things. Now in earthquake, unfortunately, you are not able to observe where the earthquake is happening. This is the fundamental difference between these two. What we try to do is, we try to understand what is happening 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 kilometers below from making observation from the surface. Which is, that signal gets modified and comes to the surface, so we are not in a position really to see what happens. So in that scenario, how do we know the structure and composition of the entire lithosphere? I think since Dr. Ravi is here, I would like to say that what we need is, we need to have the monitoring stations which we have, but whether the density is sufficient or not, we have to make an assessment. We may need different densities, say let's say in Himalaya or in Kutch or let's say near Jabalpur or different places. So one is that what we need, and some good estimate we can make, we may need additional 400, 500, 600 seismic stations to do that. We also need to have various transects or temporary stations at certain specific areas. In the past, efforts have been made to take these transects, let's say across Himalaya or across Northeast. With Venice also we have tried, but somehow it has not happened. So we need many such temporary stations where we take the transects to put this into system. The third thing, we should not ignore the ocean bottoms. We also need information through ocean bottom seismometers to understand this, which we have in few places. We had deployed for some time, but I think we need a much more dense program to have that. The third thing, once we have this, we also need information which can come from the various satellites like GRESS or altimeter, which can also provide certain structure of the lithosphere. We have now satellite Shyam, which can provide a lot of magnetic data, which is also very critical. And the one which is very grateful Dr. Prakash has come is what we are trying to do, like using GPS and all, we are trying to measure the stress at the plate boundaries, which is very important. We need a much more dense network of GPS to measure the stress. But what is more important is to measure the strain everywhere. Because how this movement is affecting the entire subcontinent is not very well understood. And this strain measurement can be done with the SAR interferometer. We are going to launch a satellite, SAR, hopefully this year or maybe next year, which will provide the strain everywhere, and I'm sure Dr. Prakash will enlighten us about this. And this should be further validated by putting deep borehole. Ministry of Earth Science already has put borehole geophysics lab, essentially to understand the triggered earthquake, but I think the scope has to be enhanced to have a various deep boreholes, let's say north and south of Palghat Gap, which is one of the major structure of the Narmada suture, in the Shivaliks, in the northeast. There may be challenges, I'm not saying, but India has their own capability to drill at very deep depths. So I think this is and this all thing we need to model. Dr. Mishra is here with tomographic model. I think the way we do for brain, we also need to do for the earth. That what is all happening. I think this kind of a program will be able to provide us some of the answers to begin with on the many questions which we have raised, whether we are going to get earthquake in Himalaya, Uttarakhand or Himachal or Kashmir or not, or whether the precursors, Dr. Ravi mentioned, we have a lab in Guntur where all the precursors have been placed. How microzonation can help? What is the difficulty which we are facing to integrate the microzonation map with the master plans, urban master plans? The other issue which is now going to get ground is a triggered earthquake. Large engineering structure also can develop earthquake. There are some places where monsoon heavy rains are triggering earthquake. We don't know still what is happening in Palghar, why the earthquakes are occurring. Maybe not very large dimension, but it creates a panic. Now, at the same time, with this knowledge, we need, as I told earlier, that the response and the setting up of NDMA and NDRF, I think, has dramatically changed our response mechanism. And the public outreach program, I think we started at the school level, And I think we need to continue this all over India. As we have give you example of the environment, when the issue of environment started in schools, our children are much more aware and sensitive to the environment than what we were. So I think these are some of these things, and I'm sure that a lot of experts are here. Mostly everybody is the director of major labs which are looking one or the other aspects of this present. And I'm sure that in the end of the day, we will have some answers. And as Shyam Saran ji has said, that some recommendation we would come up, and Dr. Ravi also mentioned about the policy. We would be very happy to produce some document which could be taken forward to address this issue. So I'm extremely grateful to all my colleagues and all the participants here to come in a very large number. And I'm sure that end of the day, we will have some definite answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nayak, for introducing the subject and to give us a sense of what we hope to achieve through this workshop. One of the weaknesses that I have found during my work in government is that while we have very important and globally acclaimed institutions of excellence, perhaps what we also need to do is for these institutions to be able to talk to each other as well. There is always a tendency to work in somewhat like silos, and therefore each provides a very, I think, very fine picture of a problem looking from one angle, but we do not always get a complete picture. So having some kind of a cross-domain, cross-disciplinary kind of an approach is something which perhaps is one of the things that we should be looking at. And I think this is a great opportunity, this workshop, because as I said, some of the finest institutions are represented here. Perhaps this can also trigger a conversation amongst yourselves, because I think that can be a great learning from this. Second aspect which I would also like to emphasize is what Dr. Nayak mentioned, which is public outreach. That a lot of the conversations which take place among scientists, among engineers, perhaps that is language which needs to be translated into something which makes easy sense for a general kind of an audience, the general public. That is also a very key element of what we are trying to do. So I would hope Dr. Shailesh Nayak and also Dr. Ramchandran that we could perhaps from the conclusions that come out from this seminar, perhaps whatever emerges can also be translated into something which IIC would be very happy to perhaps circulate as something which would be very useful knowledge for the public at large. This is something which also perhaps we would like to think about. Dr. Nayak mentioned the need to involve students, young people. I have served in Japan, which, as you know, earthquakes are a daily phenomena virtually in that country. And this earthquake, knowledge about earthquake, how to respond is something which is now part of daily routine in all the schools. So my children who were also studying in Japanese school, the first time they were made to go through that exercise, they came back very disturbed. But it became a normal kind of thing, to put on your helmet and get under the school table. So these were incorporated as part and parcel of general education. I don't suppose this is required everywhere in India, but at least those zones which are sensitive zones, perhaps this is something which could also be incorporated. So I would hope that this also can be one of the conclusions that would come out from this. So thank you very much, Dr. Nayak. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramchandran, for your remarks at this inaugural session. And I would now turn to Dr. N Shrivastava, Director IIC, to please deliver a vote of thanks. You have the floor.
President of IIC, Honorable Ambassador Shyam Saran, Dr. Shailesh Nayak, Honorable Life Trustee of IIC, Dr. Ramchandran, Secretary Earth Sciences, ladies and gentlemen. I had the good fortune of working more than 3 decades ago in the Ministry of Earth Sciences as a Deputy Secretary, and much later as a member of NDMA. So from those 2 assignments, I had the opportunity of associating myself with what all has been going on in relating to the disaster management and particularly earthquake. As we all know that in the disaster management there are 3 important aspects. One, of course, is the response, is the last one actually. As the concept note has brought out, and so also Dr. Shailesh Nayak mentioned, that we have developed, fantastic, capability of responding to any, disaster situation. But the other 2, which are very, very important, the most important one, the second one is the capacity building, which also includes the training. And the third and most important one is the risk reduction measures, including the mitigation measures, etc. On the risk reduction side and mitigation side, a lot of work is required to be done. As the concept note has brought out that so far other kinds of disasters are concerned, we have got really good capability developed to forecast them or to predict them. But earthquake is one where our existing scientific research is not adequate to predict the earthquake. As was mentioned earlier, that the idea of holding this workshop actually emanated from our President Mr. Shyam Saran and our Life Trustee Gopal Gandhi after what has happened in Turkey and later on and also in Josimat. So we felt that we should have this workshop where the experts, the scientists who are associated with this subject are put together, are brought together, and they should deliberate, and ultimately this workshop should bring out really specific recommendations which can be given out to the policymakers as well as dissipated to the public at large. I would like to request all the speakers who are going to deliberate, speak at this workshop, that kindly make us available the text of your talk, so that we are in a position to bring out a publication of deliberation of this workshop well in time. Before I formally thank all the dignitaries who are here, I would also like to just mention that I had a good fortune of visiting Chile. As you all know, that Chile, like Japan, is one country which experiences earthquake every day. I was taken by our ambassador to meet with an architect at Chile, who was very well renowned one, and he was the one who has been credited with devising various new techniques for construction of high-rise buildings, earthquake-proof high-rise buildings. In my interaction, I found that the man was so passionate about his subject. He took me to his various projects, explained as what all techniques he has developed and what all techniques are being used. It's something really fantastic. I would like that. I'm sure in our country also things might have moved quite a lot, but I like that kind of passionate feeling should come amongst all the planners, architects, etc., and public at large, so far this aspect is concerned. One area which I would like to particularly mention is micro-zonation. I think that Dr. Mishra is going to speak on that subject. Micro-zonation, no doubt, has been taken note of by all the state governments and municipal authorities, and they have also been included in the building codes. But I really do not know how strictly that is being enforced. Because that is one area, if we do not do, we are only inviting disaster which we cannot really do. So with these few words, I would like to now end here, and I would like to profusely thank our President, Mr. Shyam Saran. He was not well, but looking at the importance of this workshop, he has taken his time out and he is with us here. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I am grateful to Dr. Nayak, as President has mentioned. Dr. Nayak is the one who really conceptualized the entire thing, and a fantastic kind of format has been presented over here. I'm sure, a lot of good deliberations will take place. Dr. Nayak, thanks a lot for your initiative. We are fortunate to have Dr. Ramchandran with us, Secretary of Earth Sciences, the man who is at the helm of all these matters in Government of India. I am sure whatever recommendations are emanating from this workshop, Dr. Ramchandran would be able to take it to the policy makers. He himself is a part of the policy making and see that these recommendations are given due recognition and maybe many of them get implemented. I would like to thank all the scientists, the experts, subject matter experts who are here, who are going to participate, and to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions. I'm sure you'll all benefit from this workshop. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will take a short break for tea before we start the first session.